Most weight loss plans are one size fits all, not taking into account each person's individual needs. Noom is here to change that. Noom Weight uses psychology. That's why they say losing weight starts with your brain. But it also takes into account your unique biological factors, which also affect weight loss success. The program helps you understand the science behind your eating choices and why you have cravings. Everyone's journey is different, so your daily lessons are personalized to you and your goals. One of the great things about Noom is that it's nourishing instead of restrictive. They focus on progress instead of perfection. You don't have to give up carbs, or anything for that matter. Have cravings? Food FOMO? Noom can help you lose weight while still enjoying your favorite foods. To date, Noom has helped more than 5.2 million people lose weight. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noom.com.
Hi, I'm Thomas Senna, co-host of the SNL Hall of Fame podcast.
And I'm Jeremy Dove, co-host of the Bigger Than the Game podcast.
Jeremy and I have joined forces to create a new podcast called Pop Culture 5 to ask the question, what are the 5 essential things about any given pop culture topic?
It could be 5 essential movies by an actor of our choice.
Or 5 essential songs by a musician of our choice.
We're not making a list of our personal favorites, it's the essentials.
And we better do a good job of justifying our essentials because one of us will have veto power each episode.
And I'm ready to tell Thomas why he's wrong.
All right, Jeremy, all right. Well, actually, why don't we give everyone an out-of-context peek at what we've been up to? So Pharrell was right next to me, and we looked at each other, and we were kind of like bobbing our heads. He wasn't wearing his hat. Nobody really knew he was kind of incognito. But I had to do a double take. I'm like, that's Pharrell. And then he looked at me.
You just slipped that in there, this big name drop here. I was next to my man Pharrell. Like, whoa. I never heard this, everyone.
So join us to celebrate and discuss the essentials of pop culture.
Listen and subscribe to Pop Culture 5 wherever you get your podcast.
Hey, it's time to gather around the water cooler to talk the SNL Hall of Fame. Hey, it's JD here, and welcome back to the Saturday Night Live Hall of Fame Water Cooler podcast. I am inside the Hall of Fame right now, heading down to the lunchroom where the water cooler is situated, and I hope to meet my friends Joe and Shari down there. There they are. Joe, how you doing, my friend?
How's it going?
It's going great, buddy.
Good, you?
Yeah, I'm great.
And Shari, how are you?
I just took a sip from my water bottle from the delicious springs of the SNL Hall of Fame water cooler, and it was quite delicious.
Excellent.
All right.
Well, today we are going to be chatting about a 4-time host that was discussed on Monday's episode with Mike Murray, and that is Sir Charles Barkley. Shari, do you want to recap Monday's Hall of Fame episode?
Thank you, JD. I would love to. This was such a fun episode because it was one of my possibly favorite podcast people. He's in the Saturday Night Network. He has his own podcast within that called SNL Stats, and he is Mike Murray, and he was chatting with Thomas about Charles Barkley, and I am such a fan of Mike. He has a head for stats like very few people I know, and his tables and everything that he does for the Instagram and the Facebook page, and I think lots of other social media for the Saturday Night Network is so admirable. And as Thomas so knowledgeably pointed out, as Thomas always does, Mike is so much more than stats. He has a huge encyclopedic knowledge of Saturday Night Live, and he's a big sports fan, which I think is what got him into the stats of SNL, because as he said, SNL is live, just like sports. So there's a lot of comparables. And so that's sort of one of the reasons he started doing stats on Saturday Night Live. And he's just so interesting to listen to. I really enjoyed hearing him and Thomas break down all of Sir Charles's four, just four, guest appearances, but a lot for an athlete. I think he has the most appearances as far as Thomas and Mike could find out. Four is the most for an athlete host, and that would be 93, 2010, 2012, and 2018. And they talked about Charles's meager beginnings as a first-time host back in 93, where he was sort of just being Charles in a lot of the sketches, like the Great Stuart Smalley sketch, where Muggsy Bogues shows up, all the way through to 2018, where he goes toe-to-toe with one of the greats. I mean, none of us would contest that. One of the greats, Kate McKinnon, here as Sheila Savage in her last call, one of her best characters, in my opinion, one of her funniest. And we've all met a Sheila Savage at some time in our lives, so it's very relatable. And Charles, as one of her innocent victims, plays one of the gentlemen that she seduces, I guess, at the bar. And wow, has he grown in those four host appearances. So that was the thrust of it. They talked a lot about athletes on the show and a lot about non-comedy hosts in general. And it was a really, really interesting and enthralling discussion.
So I agree. I was listening to it, and I had my notes prior to listening to it, and they were very in sync with everything I already wrote and everything I was thinking. And I just wanted to give Thomas a little shout out because it's almost like he's like the Commander Data. He's like a human computer of Saturday Night Live, where he knows it to the minute and how many times and who did what, and it is like by the numbers is like an understatement. It's like a very, like, he breaks down Saturday Night Live in very, I don't know what other phrase to use, but like binary, thing where like he is a really great resource. But to get back to Charles Barkley, you did say something about Shari said something about range and that was one of the first things I wrote before I even did any research was the evolution of his acting. And so now there's one thing that they said in the podcast that kind of irked me that I just had to not irked. It was just a twinge. All right, how about this? I knew this for years. This was in my memory. They were talking about his first monologue, and it was a thing with Barney and how he. Now they didn't know what the origin or what they were, what that was parodying. At the time, Charles Barkley did a commercial. I think it was a Nike commercial where it was him and Godzilla, and then he roughs up Godzilla playing basketball. So then when he cut to Barkley hosting Saturday Night Live, he was doing a send-up of that commercial, only instead of Godzilla, it was Barney. And the thing that I always loved about that sketch is when we, saw that commercial, it's like, okay, that's funny, him and Godzilla, but everyone, like all the adults at least, like just despised Barney, or he was ripe for parody. So I think everyone thought, like, yeah, sure, Barkley and Godzilla, but wouldn't it be cool if he was roughing up Barney instead? And then then it's like you got Charles Barkley on Saturday Night Live, and it's like, yeah, it's like in the crosshairs. Like, we got the opportunity to do it. And now here's the interesting thing about that monologue. In my head, in the terms of Saturday Night Live, it's very similar to when Adam Driver hosted, which is we're going to take what he's known for, and that's how we're going to introduce him to the Saturday Night Live atmosphere. So, like, with Adam Driver, they did the Undercover Boss with Kylo Ren, and it's like, that's how we know him. And so you fly that to Charles Barkley. It's like, he did the commercial with Godzilla, that's how we know him. So when we take him into Saturday Night Live terms, we're going to do it with Barney. So, and it's like, and that's like his Charles Barkley's introduction to Saturday Night Live is sending up that commercial And then, like they pointed out, a lot of the stuff they did was him referencing himself. The donkey basketball, the big and tall store, the daily
Yes.
affirmation, and then just to wrap up my point, when you get to his fourth time hosting, yeah, he's in a sketch like you said, toe to toe with Kate McKinnon and Kenan Thompson. You know, and he's just as memorable as it's a 3-person sketch.
True.
He's doing his share as a character, and it's. I just want to point out that range from when he was setting up himself to doing toe to toe with Kenan and Kate McKinnon, and it's like that is how you grow as a host. So
it's really interesting that he comes in as an athlete, and like Shari was saying, there's not being really. Has there been any? Did you say, Shari? Repeat? Okay.
None.
That's what I thought as well.
I don't believe so.
So he gets that opportunity to grow, whereas everybody else is in a sketch and they play themselves because you're right. That's what we think of them as. We think of Wayne Gretzky as a hockey player or Peyton Manning as a football player. And, the most memorable sketches from those particular episodes are when they are playing themselves. I think the Wayne Gretzky locker room, Waikiki hockey, and when I think about Peyton,
Wayne's World.
Yes, when I think about Peyton Manning, I think about the one where he's playing football with the children.
Oh, so funny.
Yeah, the Child Help. Yeah, Foundation. Yeah, that was one of the classics.
Yeah,
it's like the United Way or something.
That's right.
Yes,
that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah, beautiful. So, is there anything else we want to talk about in terms of athlete? Like, does Barkley get graded on a different scale as a host because he's an athlete who's been invited back A, multiple times, and B, worked with multiple casts, which tends to be the hallmark of a good host, right? Usually It's a 5-timer, somebody who's worked with multiple casts, and I forget what my first one was, but whatever. You heard it. So what do you guys think?
I do believe he that's the second thing actually I wrote was grade on a curve, because when it's a non-comedian host, and let's narrow it down a little bit because there's also been musical hosts, but let's narrow it down to sports hosts. When it's a athlete host, you do kind of have to grade on the curve because they studied their whole life to be an athlete, and then now they're in a totally different environment where they have to not only act, they have to act funny, and not only do they have to act funny, they have to act funny live. So,
right.
And it's just it's almost like even comedians have a hard time doing it, let alone someone that's never studied at Groundlings or Second City. So it's almost like a joke to have like an athlete on, and to see an athlete be in sketches where they're not playing themselves or not doing a send up of their image. It is like, okay, now you're going without a net type thing. Like the joke of yourself isn't there. You have to be just as good as the other ones. And but yeah, so I don't want to keep going because but yeah, how do you feel about this, Shari?
That's an interesting point, Joe. It is very hard. And when you compare him to other athletes, he's almost like running away with it. There's a couple that are good. JD mentioned a few of the good ones. Michael Jordan didn't do too bad on his one and only outing. But Barkley is one of the few that's really just seems to get it from the beginning. As Thomas and Mike both mentioned, he gets what funny is. He was funny before he was on SNL. He had a sense of humor before. He doesn't take it so seriously, and he gets what comedy is. Nancy Kerrigan, not so much. I don't care what they say about Michael Phelps. Mike and Thomas were really jealous. That was not a good episode, in my opinion. And it was only good when they kept him out of the sketch as much as possible. He's a lovely guy. He swam here at U of M. I have nothing but respect for that. He's doing great things for the mental health industry. I have nothing but respect for him. He's not funny at all. Charles, and he doesn't get funny. Charles gets funny, and that is hard. We've talked here, I think, several times. It is so hard to make people laugh. It's really easy to make people cry. Just shoot the dog, right? But to make people laugh is so hard, and that he can do it as much as he does consistently, with help, yes, but still very, very admirable. So I give him mad props.
Yeah, I do too. I have a, it's going to be interesting to see, and this will lead into our next segment, but it's going to be interesting to see where he lands the first time out vote-wise, and then we can sort of make a path. There's no way he gets in on the first ballot. There's no way. Not a chance.
No.
Absolutely not.
But, maybe if the score is low enough, maybe we consider a special exhibit in the Hall of Fame for all sports athletes. And Charles can be, King Charles of the athlete on SNL wing.
Yeah.
He's definitely the king. I mean, can you think of anybody who even compares to him athlete-wise?
Peyton Manning's episode. Was really good.
It was.
But that's a one-off, right? Like, you never know if it's lightning in a bottle or what.
I do think Peyton sort of gets being funny, too.
I do, too.
I think he sort of gets it. I think Michael Jordan has a sense of humor, but I don't know.
Joe Montana was pretty terrible.
Oh, that's right. Except
for
the Inner Thought.
That one sketch, The Inner Thoughts. Yes, that was.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and Nancy Kerrigan. I just watched that episode. Oh boy, what a stinker.
And I just want to bring one last.
Go ahead, Joe.
Just a little. I just want to give a little. Because I finally got my mom to listen to this, and my mom was a big 90s figure skater, so this whole thing is a little shout out to a new listener that we just got. So, anyway, go ahead, Shari.
I just want to say that as bad as Nancy was, and Michael Phelps, and so many others, that just made Charles just glows. So we got to give him that as we go.
He's got charm.
This discussion.
Oh yeah,
he really does, and he's still charming. All these years later, people still love him. How many years has he been broadcasting? I don't do sports. I think they said on the podcast. I think Thomas said something like 24 years.
That sounds
that was my guess.
On whatever he's on.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So yay, Charles.
And inside the NBA is he's a big part of why it's as great as it is. They work together as a Voltron, but he definitely stands out. Sorry, Shari.
Yeah, he's no, you're just saying it, JD. He's very entertaining.
Yeah.
And he works well he works well with his hosts on that, just like he works well with the players, whichever cast it was, on SNL.
That's right.
He takes from others and he learns. He's a learner.
Yes, that's true.
And he gets better, and I love that about him. Whether it's golf, which they talked about on the podcast, or being funny, he is not afraid to make mistakes and to learn from them. And for a guy of his stature, especially, not to be rude to athletes, but they often tend to have big egos. He's got his ego pretty in check. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have one, but he's got it fairly in check, and that's impressive to me, too.
Yeah, seems that way.
I'm glad you said that, because another note I had, I wasn't even sure if this was going to make it into the show, but I felt like this is a good time to bring it up. It almost feels like he's a placeholder host. Like, if they couldn't find someone that week, maybe not that week, but like, hey, we got a gap, we got someone to host this week and someone to host that week. We need someone to host in the middle. So it kind of feels like they kind of go to him. But here's the thing. There has to be gaps in the year where the actor isn't promoting a movie or a TV show, and I don't think they seek out Charles Barkley. I think
gotcha.
Okay. So and then because it seems like he hosted the first time because he was a basketball player and and they pointed out on the other podcast it was like X amount of years before he hosted again, and the last 3 times were kind of closer together.
Yes.
And those 3 times is where you really see the evolution of his acting get better
for sure.
and better. So yeah, I just want to point out that like even though he was probably like not sought after, like, oh, he's definitely got a host in January, like or whatever. But they went out to him, and then like the more he hosted, the better he got. So I don't know. That's.
All right, let's then move on to our next segment. I've got a question for you, Joe. Is there anybody in the Hall of Fame already, or you know what? For hosts, it's difficult because there's not that many. But on the ballot, is there anybody that you see that might have a similar path?
I'm looking at the people that are, because obviously you have to weed out, and obviously not the cast members, not the writers, so obviously not them. So I'm kind of looking at like Adam Driver, or maybe not Adam Driver, because I'm trying to think about non-comedian hosts,
right?
And and like last week we were talking about with U2 and stuff like that. So I feel that when people look at the ballot, they're going to be looking at like Randy Newman, and like who like attributed to the show. In a kind of non-traditional way. Like, I know Charles Barkley's a host, but, it's going to be like that alternative thinking where, like, so I think people like that. So he's in a category like that because it is important to think in these lines of, because Saturday Night Live, at its core, is a variety show. So you need a variety of hosts. You can't just keep going to comedians and Tom Hanks and
right.
So
I think they've done a really good job the last 3 or 4 years of getting some eclectic people. Some of them have worked out, some of them have not, but they've been a little risky. So I like that. I like a little danger.
The other hosts on the ballot are Adam Driver and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And I do think those two are tough competition for Charles as far as percentage of the vote that he's going to get when people are looking at hosts. Like, who's going to fill their host slot? Some people vote like that. I'm going to do this musical guest. I'm going to do this host. I'm going to do these cast members, these writers. They have certain amounts of each category that they're going to put on their ballot. And if you're picking between those 3 hosts and you're only going to pick one, I feel like Charles is going to get shut out. Because Julia, who we're going to talk about later, and Adam are like exceptional. I think both of them are very high on people's, especially super fans like us, esteem. They have a lot of respect. They were both in the greatest 50 hosts that Saturday Night Network just did. And Charles was too, but I believe Charles was a bit lower. I can't quite remember.
Yeah, he was in it, but I forget where he was. Was he in the 40s?
He might have been, and I feel like JLD was just above him, and Adam was in like the top 15
or something. But yeah, he was very high up. Yeah, it was a great list. If you haven't listened to it, go to YouTube, look up the SNN, subscribe, and turn on your notifications because they're getting into gear for the new season, and it's going to be a big one. So, fellas,
it is
Beck Bennett versus Shari O'Terry versus Garrett Morris versus Adam Driver versus U2 versus Charles Barkley. If you could only vote for one, which one would you vote for, and why, Shari?
Oh, hands down, I think it's going to be Shari O'Terry for me, with Garrett Morris a very close second. I think Shari is such a riot, and watching her sketches again just made me love her all the more, and I think she's so underrated. So she's definitely my favorite of this group so far.
Excellent. Where does Charles slot in? Is he take up the rear, or is he somewhere in the mix?
Yeah, he's probably at the lower end of my 6.
Okay. How about you, Joe?
Same. I mean, you look at the competition. All right, like we said it before. He's not getting in on the first round. We're kind of having this discussion for a later year. Like we'll probably circle back to this. He's definitely not getting in on this year. But to answer your question, if you look at the competition, I mean, you got cast members, you got Adam Driver, and then you got Charles Barkley, who is like it has so many, like, you're grading on a curve. You have to give him so many whatever the I'm trying to think of the right word. Anyway, you have to put him in a special category,
right?
And so he's on the bottom. I mean, and it's only because, and again, it's because of the competition.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think so. So who have you got at number 1 again? Is it the same as it was last week?
Know what? These discussions have been making me flip-flop. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, adding Charles Barkley to this isn't going to change. He's not going to go up or change everyone else's ranking or anything like that. So, yeah, it's kind of like my ranking from last week, which is Garrett, Shari, Adam Driver, you two, Beck Bennett, and then, yeah, Charles Barkley.
Okay.
So,
Interesting. This is
it's all at the same.
We're getting we're moving from a simmer to a boil, folks. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you want my ranking?
Yeah, hit us.
Okay, so again, I come from I do a different angle than Joe. Joe talks about who he wants to see. I talk about who I think the voters are going to vote for. And my rankings have not changed very much. It's still Beck number 1, Adam number 2, Shari number 3, Garrett number 4. Charles is going to edge out you two because we've discussed you two has that curse of the musical guest. So I think they're going to be in the bottom.
Yeah, maybe fighting for that 10%.
I could see that.
Yeah, very much fighting.
What I think is really interesting, Joe, who did you have at number 6? Your
bottom?
Like the last person. Who was your very bottom?
Barkley.
Okay, so that means Bennett was your number 5.
Yes.
Bennett.
That probably will change as we go on.
Bennett is Shari's number 1. This is interesting to me.
But I like that we have different perspectives of who I would vote and who she thinks is getting in. So I think that makes, a total 3D thing of having two perspectives of the same thing.
Good point.
I think Beck he's going to get like 63%, kind of like Kate got last year. I think he's just going to miss getting in, and he'll probably get in the following season, just like I think Kate's going to get in this season.
Yeah.
I just think people remember. These are a lot of casual fans, as we've talked about. It's not all super fans like us. And I think the casual fans just have very short memories. I could be wrong, but from what I'm seeing, as the Hall of Fame has been on for, several seasons now, that's the pattern that I'm seeing. Is people have short memories.
I think you're right, because if you think about like even the third golden age, with the great Hader, Sudeikis, Wig, on and on and on and on, a murderer's row, really, Forte and Armisen and Andy Samberg. At any rate, Justin Timberlake doesn't get in as host, from that era. And I don't know if you remember the first couple of seasons of the Saturday Night Live Hall of Fame, the SNL Hall of Fame. But Lonely Island didn't get in for like 3 seasons.
3 seasons.
Lonely frickin' Island. Like, what is that about?
I know that, and they're like the internet's, the internet made them.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah, the internet darling. Yeah, I mean, like, what was it? Jack in the Box.
That's right.
I mean, that was like that. introduce people to YouTube and everything. So you would think that the internet would be like, loving, like Internet meets Saturday Night Live. That would carry over to the Hall of Fame.
That's right. Like Lazy Sunday was the first viral.
Sunday.
No, but Dick in a Box exploded them. Lazy Sunday was the first viral thing, which was for like early adopters of YouTube. But by the time Dick in a Box came out, YouTube was, much more mainstream. And a lot of people saw it. And a lot of people, watched the Christmas episode of SNL as well. So...
But that was a lot of years ago.
It was. That's what I was going to say. It's like 19, 20 years ago. And that backs up Shari's point, which is like, some of the more casual fans might be Zetters or probably not alphas, but Gen Zetters. And they have, just a different POV, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Agreed.
I agree.
Hey, folks, do you have final words for the SNL Hall of Fame audience?
Just keep listening and, hit those subscribe buttons.
Nice. Shari?
Same here. I am having so much fun. I look forward to this every week, and I'm so excited to be here. And I feel like every episode is more interesting than the last. Thomas does such an amazing job, and all of the guests are so well chosen for their nominee. Like Mike with Charles Barkley was just like a perfect choice. So I am very excited for the next episode, which I bet you're going to talk about right now, right, JD?
Well, why don't you share it with us, Shari?
Oh, sure.
Keep this wagon wheel rolling.
I'm very excited for my compadre Joe, who is a huge Bob Odenkirk fan. And that's who we're talking about next week. Thomas will have on the fabulous Nicole Brady, who I believe has been on a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
And she is going to regale us with the career of Bob Odenkirk on Saturday Night Live, where he kind of got his comedy roots. So I'm looking forward to that one. And I know Joe is.
Well, folks, it's been a great time spending this lunch break with you. If anybody out there listening wants to reach out, you can find us at snlhofwc@gmail.com. And just let us know what you're thinking. And we'd love to hear from you. We welcome guests in the future now that we've got our chops. And if you're interested, let us know. So on behalf of Joe and Shari, we're going to head back to work and stay thirsty. Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame Water Cooler. To connect with Joe and Shari, join our Facebook group at facebook.com/group/SNLHOF. To email the cast, write to snlhofwc@gmail.com. Please subscribe, share, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. To podcasts and such.